Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, and we are continuing our conversation of talking about the process of applying for jobs, basically trying to be a network engineer. The challenges that is a very big thing for people today. So we've been through a couple of different sections so far. We talked about the job searching process. We talked about submitting the resume, and we talked about the sometimes phone interview. So this episode is focused on the in-person interview. This is where it becomes important because you're going into the environment, you're meeting the different engineers, the staff, the management team, and based on that particular interview or multiple interviews, it will determine what the ultimate decision will be for being hired into that company for the position that you're seeking. So once again, I have presentations all prepared, and let's get right to it and talk about the in-person interview process and things to keep in mind and what companies are looking for and take consideration of their ultimate decision. Okay, so let's dive right in. And the first thing is it's all about presentation. Presentation is everything. You want to present the very best of yourself. And this is something that's important for a lot of different companies because you could be interacting with the management team. I mean, not just managers, but maybe directors, the VP, or maybe the president of the company itself in a meeting. You could be in front of the user community or maybe in front of their own customers, their clients. And how you present yourself could reflect on your kind of work ethics. What you see is what you get. And if you come off very unorganized, not very kept very well together, it could also mean that you're also disorganized and all over the place when it comes to your professional work ethics. So presentation is something that's important for a lot of different companies, especially if they have a lot of customers or clients that you could be interacting with. And if you are a network engineer, this could be something that could likely happen down the road. So you want to keep that consideration in mind. Now, when I talk about presentation, nothing fancy, just simple business dress. So no sneakers. If you want to wear a tie, there's nothing wrong with that. Just do not do a bow tie or a tux. Don't do that. Keep it simple. So for me personally, I have always done interviews with a dress shirt, some khakis, and some nice shoes. So I've never done a tie for my interview at all. Now, if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that. It gives off a good presentation. So once again, keep that in mind. Now, if you are a guy, make sure that you're shaved and that you're clean. So make sure that is something that you keep in mind. Another component is, well, it's pretty obvious, but some people don't really know that, is you want to be on time. And that means that you're serious about this opportunity. So if you are doing an interview process, you want to make sure that you know where this place is and consider traffic. We live in a world where traffic does exist. And if you have an interview 9 o'clock in the morning, you need to accommodate the extra time that may be required for you to get to that interview on time. Because if you're late, that means that you're not taking their time seriously. And also it could reflect on other aspects of your job. If you're late for an interview, you could be late for completing a project. For me personally, that's a big deal. I've seen companies have particular timetables of when something needs to be completed. So you not showing up for an interview may not be a big deal, but it is. It could reflect on what could happen if you are employed by that company. And another thing, of course, is eye contact. Eye contact shows something about that you're confident. And of course, a good, firm handshake. Remember, you want to be confident in what you are going to provide to the company and the skills that are reflected on your resume. Confidence is important, especially if you are a network engineer. This is something also that I talked about during the phone interview process. You really have to make sure that you are listening and you're paying attention. You know, Of course, doing eye contact, not weird eye contact like you're staring them down, but reasonable eye contact. But you want to listen to what is being asked and what they're talking about. You want to show interest in what they are saying because you want to be hired. When you're very excited and show very strong interest, companies like that. So pay attention. Don't daze off. That's really important. And if there's a particular question that's being asked, answer the question. This is a great example. This happened to my wife a couple of days ago. So she was interviewing a person for a position. And she asked this person a very simple question. What are 5 things that you are passionate about? Well, the person just answered one thing and went off and talked about something else. They never answered the question. They were not listening. They were not paying attention of basically following instructions. That is something that we talked about during the process of submitting your resume. You need to follow the instructions. And something simple like that, that candidate could not answer it. And that gave a very negative impression on that company to not consider for employment. So listen and pay attention and answer the questions that are being asked. Very important. And of course, honesty. Honesty is something that I've mentioned is very important because it's all about how you answer the questions. And because when you're answering particular questions that are being asked, of course, you want to follow the instructions. But this, of course, reflects on your credibility. This is something that we talked about before, so I don't want to talk about this a whole lot more. But how you answer questions is important. You want to make sure that you know what is on your resume. Another thing is being humble. So if you come off very arrogant or overconfident, that is bad. Basically, the interview is over. You will not be considered for that position. So what is the difference between being humble and being overconfident? Well, when you come off arrogant or overconfident, it comes off that you don't need to be part of a team, that you know everything. And in reality, you do not know everything. There's a lot of moving parts in networking technologies, down to the messages, down to what's in the packets or in the headers. There's a lot of things that you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that you're not smart. Okay, there's a lot of things I don't know, but I know how to research that and to get the information that I need. So if you're humble, that's a person that is open, that they know that they do not know everything, but they know how to get the information. And this comes very important when you're part of a team, and when you are a network engineer, you could be part of a team with different people, with server people, desktop people, database individuals, storage, data center engineers, management, users, customers, all part of a single project that you're working on together. I've done this so many times. I've been part of a large team doing various deployments for disaster recovery, for new data center builds that we're doing. You're all part of a team, and being humble is important. Well, why is that important? Well, let's say, for example, somebody asks in a meeting, they ask you, can we do VPN across our WAN? Now, an arrogant or an overconfident person will likely answer, absolutely, we can definitely do that, guarantee it. Well, a humble person will answer, well, that depends. We need to see what hardware we do have currently in place, the software that is supported, and if the ISP is also, or the WAN provider, if they can support that, because they may have their own security that could be blocking some of the VPN ports that are required. So let us get that information. Let's figure out what we currently have, and then we can then determine if we can support that on our infrastructure. Okay, that is a great answer to that question. That you're being open, you're being humble, that you're not sure if it supports that or not. It could be, but you don't know. You want to do your research, and then you can provide details in the next meeting. So you really want to come off as being humble. Now, this could be tough if you do not know which camp you're a part of. Are you more humble or are you more arrogant? And what I tell people is, well, talk to people that you trust, family, very close friends, and ask them a very honest question. And you tell them, I want you to be very honest with me because this is important for my life, but also for my career. Do I come off very humble or very arrogant when I talk about stuff? And again, please be honest. You want to ask a question like that, and hopefully the people who care about you, they want you to succeed. So they're going to give you some very good feedback, and that can help you to determine where you reside. Now, I want you to be who you are. Don't change who you are, but you really have to embrace the option of being humble, that you do not know everything. I can ask you 3 questions. I can look at your resume, ask you three questions, and I guarantee you cannot answer it. And you can do the same for me. There's a lot of things. You can ask me stuff about storage. I don't specialize with storage. Okay. So I probably won't know a lot about that. Okay. But that's what I'm talking about here. You gotta be humble. If there's something that you do not know, you need to be very forward about that information. Another thing that's important for the in-person interview process, I know I spent a lot of time talking about being humble, but that is a very important concept. Companies have turned people away or has rejected them because they come off overconfident. So that's why it was important for me to really talk about that for this particular segment. Okay, but moving along, another thing that is important is you want to make sure that you are, prepared. You want to make sure that you can provide examples of projects that you have worked on, how you supported various issues. Basically, you want to make sure that you know what is on your resume. Because I could ask you, because I'm looking at your resume, to see your kind of work that you've been working on and how you've been working and supporting on things. And I ask you questions maybe about, tell me how you handled this project. Tell me the steps. Like if I give you a new project, how would you handle that? So you want to make sure that you can provide examples of the projects that you worked on and how you were able to do the projects or work on an issue and things like that. And of course, as I mentioned before, you want to know what is on your resume. That's really important. This is something that is sometimes confusing for me because when I ask people certain things on their resume, they don't know that. And it comes off like you're just putting stuff on it just to make it look nice and fancy. Well, when it gets to the technical questions, we will quickly know what you know and what you do not know. And that will lack with you being humble and being honest. So you want to be very careful of that. Be prepared and know what is on your resume. So also during your in-person interview process, there is a big caution here. This is a very big one. So a question may come up about something that is questionable on your resume. So let's say that you went to college for a couple years, but you dropped out for whatever reason. Or there is a long gap between jobs. So maybe you worked at one company, then all of a sudden there's a 3-month gap or a 1-year gap. That is a concern to companies. They do look at that. Because it's a concern for them for many, many different reasons. It's a concern that maybe you don't follow through on that. And it could also be very questionable to your skill set. If you haven't been working for 3 months or to a year, you could likely lose what you've been doing during that particular time period. So if you are interviewing for a senior network engineering position and you haven't done work in over a year, that comes off very, very bad. So management may see this and have some concerns. So you need to be prepared to come up with an answer if that comes up. If they ask you a question of why did you drop out of college? I'm curious. Or why is there a gap between jobs? Be prepared to have an answer if that question comes up. That's very, very important. The other thing is with career goal kind of questions that may come up. So let's say that you want to be a network engineer. That is your career goal. But you're applying for maybe a help desk or a technical support or maybe a network technician position. Okay? So you can state your overall goal for your career, that you want to be a network engineer. But it's important that you emphasize the importance of the job that you are applying for. Because if you don't, management may see this as the job that you're applying for is only a stepping stone to something else. That you don't really care about this. I just need to do this so I can eventually become a network engineer. You don't want to do that. You want to show that you are interested in the job that you are applying for. So the bottom line, when it comes to the in-person interview, is really about the presentation of how you're presenting yourself to the company. What you see is what you get. And it also pertains to your communication, eye contact, listening and paying attention. This is a big part of when I talk about presentation. So you want to present the very best of yourself. The other thing is being prepared to answer questions that will likely come to you. And those will be questions based on your resume. So guess what? Know what is on your resume. Be prepared to answer questions about the different projects that you worked on that were very interesting, different challenges that you had and how you resolved those challenges, how you worked as a team, how you fix issues. If you worked specifically on a project, how would you do that from start to finish? Companies love it when you talk about things in a step-by-step perspective. I have always done that. Like first I do this, then I do that, then I do this. Companies love that because you're presenting a methodical approach for how you're doing something. They can see it in their heads of how you could be doing things, and they like that. It's very predictable. So keep that in mind. That's why being prepared is very, very important. Okay, so when it comes to the ultimate decision, when a company makes their decision to hire you, besides the usual salary and other references, let's forget about that for a second. But that only happens if they really, really like you. And really there are three components that determine that. The first one is your technical skills based on the requirements of the position. So if you are hired into my department, and if we do a lot of OSPF, so I want a person that has a good foundation of OSPF routing. If you do not have that, you may not be a good fit. So once more, you want to know what is on your resume from a conceptual perspective, but also from a hands-on perspective. You want to keep that in mind. Okay, but the technical skills is important. The other thing is with the personality and if you are a good fit with the department and with the culture of the company as a whole. Because different companies have different cultures, very different ways of how they do things with their own personality. Some take things very seriously, some are very open, like, oh, whatever, we're just having fun here. It all depends on the culture of the company. And usually what I tell people, and this is something that I have learned ever since I was an intern. Wow, this is back in 1996 or something like that. And I was taught something very important, and I took that with everything that I do for my job, even as a consultant working for other companies or other clients I do work for, is that you need to adapt or you need to have a neutral personality. What does that mean exactly? Well, basically, there's a couple of things with this. So one of the things that I learned when I was an intern is that there's two things that you do not talk about in a work environment. You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about religion. Those are very, very personal things. When you're working, it's very professional. It is always business. There's no such thing as personal. After hours, sure, you can hang out with your coworkers and you share similar type of beliefs. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't talk about politics. Don't talk about religion, especially starting out. You can get a feel over time on the right people that you may want to have the conversations with if you have something in common. There's nothing wrong with that. So I learned about that. But also, you also want to be neutral in terms of not just being known for cracking up jokes all the time. Don't really do that. Some people, jokes are very subjective. Not a lot of people will find certain things funny. Like there are a lot of people that find movies by Adam Sandler funny. I don't find that funny though, So if you say jokes like that in front of me, I may feel very uncomfortable. It's a safe bet. Don't do a lot of jokes like that, or no jokes at all. But also, you don't want to use a lot of bad language. A lot of companies that I sometimes work with, they have a very potty mouth, as we call it. They use a lot of bad words among themselves, of course, not with their customers or their users, but they say a lot of bad language. And sometimes when there's a new person that comes into a company, they get very uncomfortable when they hear people talk in a very raw manner. And really the rule of thumb is you want to be neutral. Don't use bad language. Don't do a lot of bad jokes. Don't do political or religious kind of conversations. Just be very neutral, see what they're passionate about. Just ask them, hey, what things are you passionate about? And they could tell you, oh, I like things about my car, or I like to build things, because that means you're showing interest in what the other people are doing there. And that's very, very important, because if you come off very offensive, you may not be supported by many members of your team. So if they need to back you up or vouch for you if you want to move ahead and move along, that could be an issue. So just something to keep in mind. It's more of a personal thing that I have definitely seen, is that when you are neutral, you are very effective. You will get along perfectly in a team working environment. So just keep that in mind. I've seen a lot of people who have a lot of outrageous stories and personalities, and it makes people feel very, very uncomfortable, even with the management team, and it could come back to bite you. I've seen people in that position. So again, these are the considerations to keep in mind for the in-person interview. The presentation, being prepared, and really being prepared is probably the biggest one of all, because this is really what's going to determine if you are hired or not. And that will conclude another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, continuing our conversation about the process of applying for jobs and what companies like and what they don't like. So we talked a lot about things about being humble, being prepared, and the ultimate decision for why a person is being hired. So consider those components and start practicing now, because rehearsing, being prepared of answering these questions is important. Now, there's one thing I do want to bring up, which is important. We're not looking for perfection, companies, they're not looking for you being perfect, okay? Sure, you're going to be nervous for an interview. That's expected. You're not given points off for that, right? Because you do want to get hired into that position. But again, really, out of everything that I really said, humble, being prepared. If you're able to do that, you should be able to succeed with any interview that you go through. And also, when it comes to being prepared in terms of presenting your approach for how you do projects, how you configure something, how do you support something. Like usually I do this first, then I do this, then I do that. Present a methodical approach. Again, that is something that I have seen personally that companies really, really, really like. I remember, this was a long time ago, a very good friend of mine. He had interest of being a network engineer within my department. We had a job opening, okay, and he had some networking experience. He was a little nervous, and I said, look, I told him, just be humble, okay? Make sure that you know what's on your resume. Be prepared to answer these questions that we work together on at these companies. But most importantly, present to them how you execute something. Because they're going to ask you something like, if I give you a project, what is expected of you? How would you do that project? So he went in, he started practicing on his approach, and he presented this step-by-step approach. The management team loved it, because I know what they like. It's very predictable. It's something expected. If you come off like, I think I probably do this and maybe I do that, you're just spitballing, as we call it. It's not very confident or clear on your approach. Because again, being confident is really important to a manager, because once again, they're giving you the keys to the kingdom. So again, those are considerations to keep in mind. So at this point, what's the next step that we're going to talk about for this particular segment of applying for jobs? Well, the next episode will be focused on, if you are hired, what are things to consider while you are working on the job? There are companies that when they hire people, there are things that they like and things that they don't like with the people that they have hired. And that could affect that person on them being employed for a longer period of time, because you could be hired as a contractor, but you could be let go within 3 or 6 months. A lot of companies put people on probation. So it all depends on your work ethics. So these are things that we're going to talk more about in a very brief segment in the next episode. So thank you for watching this video. I do appreciate it. Thank you for the great subscriptions we have gotten on our channel. That's awesome. And please subscribe to our channel. If you have questions about anything that I've talked about in this segment of applying for jobs or anything in the networking field, post your questions below, or you can send a tweet. We have a Twitter page for RouteHub, even my own personal Twitter account as well. Whatever works for you. Just post your questions. I'd like to hear from you, because once we're done with this series, I want to continue our conversation of questions that you may ask. So once more, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.